Welcome to another episode of the STR Sisterhood. I'm your host, Stacey St. John, and I am absolutely delighted to spend a few minutes with you today. Thanks so much for having me into your day. Now, before we dive into today's episode, you know it, girl, I'm going to share a quote with you that I recently read that I love. And it says, "The most difficult thing is the decision to act. The rest is merely tenacity." Those inspiring words were spoken by the one and only Amelia Earhart. Now, in today's episode, we are sitting down with Hannah Legg and learning all about her creative process as she designs and paints murals for short-term rentals. This is such a fun conversation, and I know you're going to love it as much as I did. So without further ado, let's dive into my conversation with Hannah. So today we are here with Hannah Legg, and we are going to talk all things murals for short-term rentals. Hannah, thank you so much for being with us.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me. It's a great way to start a Friday.
Amen, sister. So talk to me a little bit. I'd love to hear kind of your journey as an artist. How did you get started in the world of painting murals?
So I've always been an artist. Definitely one of those little kids that was running around with a pencil and a piece of paper all the time. So art has always been a part of my life. My grandfather was an artist, so I had that kind of artistic influence from an early age. But it didn't really dawn on me that I could do artistic things as a career until I was a little later in high school. And I went to a little seminar for the Savannah College of Art and Design in Savannah, Georgia. And I think when I went into the meeting, I was a little bit like, what am I going to see in here? What am I going to see in here? I don't know. And I think I left and immediately applied to the school. I was a swimmer, so I reached out to the head coach. I was like, tell me what I need to do to come to this school. Like, it completely blew my mind that there was so much you could do with art. So I ended up going to college there in 2012, and I studied illustration, which was great. It was kind of a really great accumulation of everything that I already loved to do, and the professors are incredible. So I got, all the best kind of just education on illustration and what you could do with it. And when I graduated, I ended up moving back to Fairhope and kind of doing some freelance work for a while. I had a couple of other jobs before I got into muraling, but actually did my first mural when I was waiting tables at a little restaurant, gathering some money, figuring out my next steps. And there was this chalkboard in the middle of the restaurant, big chalkboard, probably maybe 8 to 10 feet long, 2 or 3 feet tall. And it had some gorgeous lettering up there that was done by another artist, but it was kind of faded. So they asked me to do it. And at the time I was like, yes, give me the creative work. Like, I want to paint something. Let's do it. So I came in before my shift every day for a week or so and was balancing on, tall high chairs and ladders and things, getting it done. And I just kind of fell in love with it. Like, in that moment, I was just like, wow, this is just such a great combination of art and also movement. And I really enjoyed it. So I worked as an in-house graphic designer for a while after that, and I did kind of murals on the side. Great job. I learned a lot about graphic design and marketing. It was awesome. And then I worked in a wedding invitation studio for a while as an in-house illustrator, which is just so fun. Such a fun job. But I always did murals on the side. And about 7 months ago, I was kind of like, I love this. I want to give it a shot full time. So I kind of jumped in with both feet and haven't looked back. It's been really awesome. So
cool. So I am curious, how did you go from, hey, I want to start this mural business as a full-time gig? When did short-term rentals enter into the picture, and how did it enter into the picture?
So I kind of started putting some feelers out because I'd seen some other muralists doing short-term rentals, and I was kind of like, that seems like a really great reason to travel. If the opportunity arises to travel, and all the really cool STRs I've been to have had a really unique twist in one way or another. So I was like, oh, murals are kind of great for that. And somebody actually reached out to me that wanted to do an Airbnb or a little mural in their STR locally. It's in Magnolia Springs, gorgeous little location. She called it Camellia Cove. It's so cute. But it was actually down on the back of a headboard from one of her kids' beds, growing up, she just had this headboard that she'd been holding on to. And she was just kind of like, do you think this is a good idea for this space? And I was like, absolutely. I think it is. So that was kind of my first introduction to doing murals and STRs. And it was really great getting to work with her and go see the location and see, oh my gosh, all the amazing things she'd done with the space. And after kind of posting that, just word of mouth got out. Facebook works like a small village. It's just like boom, boom, boom. So it kind of started to get the word out that was something I was interested in doing, and was able to sort of add that to my portfolio. So
fun. And I have never thought about doing a mural on a headboard. So that question, like, is there a certain size space that if someone may not have a large wall to do a mural, is there a certain size mural that you feel like works really well?
Honestly, it kind of just depends on the space and the space available. In her case, she'd seen my work and she really wanted a mural, but she didn't really have a location that she was just like, I came to look at the space, and she was like, I was picturing something here or something here. And we were kind of having a little bit of trouble with the space in general. And then she's like, what, I have this headboard. Do you think this would be cool? And I was like, absolutely. So we ended up mounting that on the wall. So as far as murals go, it's definitely on the smaller side. But realistically, I've seen some murals in some pretty crazy spaces. I've done some in some pretty crazy spaces. I did one over a outside kitchen once, and it took about a week. And I was kind of dancing around all of the, outside kitchens, utensils and the sink and the grill and everything. So really, I think it just depends on the space and what you can do with it creatively. So
that is really interesting. Okay, cool. Now talk to me a little bit about the creative process. So let's say I come to you and I'm like, I want to do a mural. What happens? Like, how does it come to life?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first off, I always get really excited because any new opportunity to be creative it's so fun. And when people approach me, like, with an idea in mind, with a space in mind, it already starts off on a good foot. But typically what I'll do is I'll message back, and sometimes I'll direct people to my website because I have a contact form that's got like basic information, like you can put in the size of the space, the location, like, roughly what you're looking for, so that I have kind of an idea of that before we jump into anything. And typically I like to hop on a call with people so we can do a little bit more in-depth sort of artistic soul searching about what they're looking for. It's always nice to be able to see the space. So if it's local and I can go in person, I love to do that. I'm definitely want to go touch the wall and kind of scope out the space a little bit, but it's definitely not necessary with FaceTime and with photographs and everything, and anything really works. I don't have to go see it in person, but it's nice if I can. And then typically from there, I'll come home and I'll put together a project proposal. It'll include like a project summary of what we talked about, a little bit about the actual, painting process. It'll have a rough quote in there, and then a mood board and some rough sketches if the inspiration strikes. And I'm just kind of like, here's some things that I think would be good for this space. I'm a very visual person, so typically I like to kind of show people what I'm thinking and try to explain it. So from that point, that usually gives them a good jumping off point. We'll get like a contract signed, and then I'll start designing away. And I do everything digitally in Photoshop first. It's all digital painting first, and then I can actually mock it up like in the space so they can really visualize what it's going to look like. And after that, we'll plan a start date. I'll get any necessary keys or key codes or, all that, and collect supplies and kind of go at it. So, yeah.
So let me make sure I understand. So you create the mural itself in Photoshop first, and then you can take a photo of the space and show the person what it will actually look like on the wall.
Yeah. It'll be a pretty close approximation. And there's usually some variation between the digital rendering and the final result. I think like with anything on screens, it's always going to look a little bit different, but it gives a very good idea of what it's going to look like in the space, so that, if they're if they're designing the rest of the room, or if they have something else going on and they're just like, I kind of want to have that visual first. It's very helpful to kind of in that direction. So
sure. That's cool. All right. Now I'm curious how you get the printout quote from Photoshop and you bring it to life? Like, what does that look like?
Okay, so there's a couple of different ways to do this. Some artists will freehand sketch it up there, and I do think I'm doing a little STR renovated school bus right now that's kind of pieced up the road for me, and they have it's a really cool bus, and we came up with a design, and I was like, you know what, I think I can probably like freehand this up here because it's on a bus. I've got enough kind of visual guides to help me like scale everything, and it gives it a really organic feel if you can do that. So that's one method of doing it. If there is the ability to project it up there and sketch it that way, that's also good. And I found with STRs, that's great because it's usually like if they're inside, I have access to electricity and all that, so I can project. But a lot of the time when I'm painting murals in general, that's not the case. So I don't necessarily have to have power. There is this method of resizing called the doodle grid method. And it's my favorite one to use. Again, it kind of gives a really good organic feel to the artwork, and it's really fun to look at because essentially you cover the wall in doodles of all, random things. I do like butterflies and flowers and cats and things. Then you take a photograph of it, bring it into Photoshop, and sort of overlay your artwork on the top, make it kind of see-through so you can see the doodles through it. And it serves as sort of like a visual guide to help you get the design up on the wall. And it's great because you can do it with any size wall. Like I have done it with like 12 by 12 walls or 12 by 8 walls, but the one I'm doing right now is a 700 square foot wall, the mural I've been working on. And I did the same method for that. And it's just really scalable. And then it gives people something fun to look at while you're working too. So, yeah, those are the kind of different processes of getting it from the screen to the wall. So
Awesome. Awesome. Talk to me a little bit about timing, because I would imagine from the perspective of if you're doing a headboard, that's a much different time frame than a 700 square foot wall. So if someone is thinking about having a mural painted in their short-term rental, from the beginning of the process to the finished completion, how much time should they budget in there?
Yeah, so it definitely depends, again, sort of on not just the like style they're going for. Something a little bit more rendered is going to take a little bit more time, not just to actually paint, but also to design, versus something that might be a little bit more graphic, kind of flat and clean and graphic. But I would always say try to budget at least like 2 to 3 weeks for design work. Because I think people are just like, I want to get this done now, but then they see the designs and they have more ideas and the creativity kind of, branches out from there. So I always tell people to budget a little extra time for being creative because they're going to get inspired. And then really the actual painting of the mural, I think is, again, just kind of going to vary on the size a little bit. I think the longest it's ever taken me to paint a mural is probably the one I'm doing now, and it's about 3 weeks, but it is very large. So, usually it comes in a little less time than that. But, I think all in told, it probably takes, between 3 to 5 weeks for the whole process. And then obviously, depending on who's staying at their location, like my accessibility and my schedule as well. So
Sure.
earlier is better. Gives us more time to play. So
There you go. Now, I'm curious, given the fact that you have worked with a variety of short-term rental owners and hosts, what are some common themes or styles that you feel like resonate well with their guests?
I guess it definitely depends on the location. I did get done doing a couple down in Gulf Shores, which is about 40 minutes away from where I live, and there's lots of STRs down there. And obviously, people coming from out of town really do love like the beach scenery and everything, but you're going to see a little bit of that everywhere. So I think it's kind of about taking what is there and what is recognizable and kind of elevating it to the next level, which I think murals really do in general. So for these, I was chatting with the owner and she's like, oh, we really like mid-century modern look. And I was like, great. So she sent me pictures of the decor that they had and the furniture that was in there. And I was like, okay, cool. So I pulled a color palette from that and, kind of made this mid-century modern composition for her that was a little bit more flat and a little bit more clean. And it must have resonated really well because they had a second rental and they did another one in there. And then at the end of August, I'm going to be starting another one for another one of their referrals that is along the same style. So I do think that resonates well with the space, that kind of very clean style. That being said, I did one on the side of this kind of barn rental. So cool, such a cool property, like a big red barn, and the Airbnb rental is up top. And then underneath, he renovated VW buses. So cool. He just had them all over the property. I think it's called Grateful Happenings, and it's so cool. But he wanted something that was a little bit more kind of like realistic and a little bit more rendered. So we ended up doing a VW bus on the side of the barn with all these flowers around it. And we had like a little cat and a little dog in the front seat because they have a lot of animals there. So that definitely resonated with his property, which was very, had a lot of art going on in there. There was a little bit more going on in general, a little bit more maximalist, if you will. So I think it just kind of depends on the vibe that the client is going for. And I'm usually really good about making something that's going to be very cohesive with that space without taking it over,
Right.
So,
What are your thoughts or perspective on, should people be putting their logo up on their mural, like making it an advertising thing versus an experience? So what are your thoughts on that?
So a lot of the short-term rentals that I've done Airbnbs for always have really cute names. So if they have a cute name, I do encourage them to put it in there somewhere. Some people have wanted to put like hashtags or put their social media handles on there. And sometimes we'll do that like kind of small in an area so that when people take pictures in front of it or take pictures of it, that handle is always in there somewhere. So while I maybe don't encourage people to do like, a huge kind of billboard advertisement of their name, I think including it in there in a creative way is a really great way to get it in there without being like really in your face about it. But yeah, that way it's present. Like I said, in photographs, if you see it online or if it bounces around on social, people have that like reference in there. So
yeah. Now, you mentioned a few minutes ago, you love to try to touch the wall if you can before painting the mural. But logistically, are there any certain types of surfaces that don't work well for a mural? Talk to me a little bit about that.
Sure. I haven't run into anything yet that I haven't been able to paint on. But I will say there are some that can end up being a little trickier than others. Interior walls, I never seem to have much of a problem because they're usually smooth, they're usually primed, and they're most of the time in quite accessible locations. Exterior walls is kind of a different ballgame because, you'll have brick or stucco or concrete. And while those materials I have worked on, and some of them I genuinely enjoy working on, they can be more absorbative. They can be a little trickier and harsher on the brushes. So it's definitely something to kind of be aware of in the design process. But I wouldn't say it's something that's particularly limiting. And usually if there is kind of an issue, we creatively can like kind of figure our way around it, which is nice. But I did a big one on very rough, like brushed stucco. And fortunately, it was one that was like off the ground and kind of, so the detail was a little bit like pushed back because it was very tricky to work on. But the mural ended up looking good. So I'm happy with it. But yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. What about climates or again, on an outdoor space? Can a mural work well in any climate or are there any parameters we should be thinking about there?
I'm pretty sure that it can work well in any climate. I think material-wise, sometimes paints or sealants will have like temperature things to be aware of when it comes to certain temperatures or certain environments. For example, one of the sealants that I used required 48 hours of no rain afterwards, which I thought was tricky because I live in Southern Alabama. But there's like little things like that, but I haven't really noticed them being too much of a limiting factor when it comes to doing murals. Although I will say that painting outside in the summertime, especially in the South, is a little, it can be kind of a lot on me.
Sure.
Like I like picking up the nice tan and it lightens my hair a little bit. It can be a little tricky just painting in the heat in general. So typically I'll try to kind of like plan my indoor outdoor murals around.
Well, let's talk about that. You just mentioned, one of the sealants you use requires 48 hours of no rain. Like, how do you balance the weather, even if you're not ready for the sealant? Like, what if you're in the middle of painting and Mother Nature decides not to cooperate? Like, how do you balance that?
So I definitely make it a point, especially in the summertime here, to check the weather ahead of time. To make sure that like I'm gonna be at least guaranteed a certain amount of time with no rain, or I can plan around, if it's gonna rain from like 2 to 4, then I'll just kind of take a break during that time, go get some work done, sit in a coffee shop, do some emailing or something. So I definitely try to plan around it. But I will also say that when it comes to mural painting, if it like suddenly downpours or something, most of the time nothing's really beyond fixing it up. I've had environmental factors come in before, and I think if you kind of like act quickly and figure out, don't get overwhelmed by it and don't panic and just kind of be like, okay, I'm going to handle this. Typically that works well a lot of the time. My mom, this is so random, but my mom is really into the weather. She has all the weather apps. And she's kind of like, her name's Francesca, and I call her Fran Cantori, like Jim Cantori on the weather. When I look at, she'll text me in the middle of jobs and be like, just so you know, in 15 minutes, like there's this blob of green that's coming across the radar. Just, be aware. And she's really good about it. So sometimes if I'm like worried about the weather, I'll be like, hey, Fran Cantori, can you need to be a weather update? Let me know what I should be expecting. But I think just planning ahead and not panicking are probably the two biggest bits of advice I have in that area.
Very good. Very good. All right. Next question I have is about local culture, going back to the creative side.
Yeah.
Is it your recommendation that hosts try to bring in any local culture into their mural? I do feel like it could potentially make sense depending on their target audience, but what have you seen work well?
I definitely think bringing in the local culture can be a really good way to add that like special local touch to your space and to your mural. Again, with the beach ones, we ended up doing kind of a beach theme with them. But I do think, definitely trying to do something creative outside of just, being like, here's a beach scene, or here's, I live in Fairhope, Alabama, and we have a lot of pelicans and piers and boats and things here. And you will see that artwork pretty much everywhere. And it's always gorgeous. Like, I can't argue with it. We've got beautiful wildlife here, beautiful scenery. So if I see a sunset, I'm like, that's great. But I think it is about kind of taking that and pushing it even further. Like, taking like an iconic image and just making sure that you're not repeating the same thing, but still having it be recognizable. Again, the wildlife is something I lean on quite heavily here in my artwork, just because I think it is so gorgeous. And it is a very recognizable and unique thing that we have here. So I think, without sort of repeating yourself and doing the same thing that everybody else is doing, including a little bit of a local culture in a unique way is a good way of doing it.
Interesting. Okay. Good to know. I am curious what one of the biggest challenges you've had doing a mural. What did that look like? Talk to us a little bit about the story and how did you overcome that challenge?
Sure. We talked a little bit about wall texture, and that can sometimes be a bit of a challenge. The weather can definitely be a little bit of a challenge. I think it's rather than just kind of like one situation that's been a big challenge. I think it's just kind of a little combination of a lot of little things. Like the first time I ever painted on metal, I did this power box over in Mobile, and I had to suddenly, I was like, yeah, absolutely, I want to do this. I'm so pumped about this. And then I was like, how do I paint on metal? So I had to kind of like, teach myself that new process of painting on metal to make sure that I was doing it right from the base up, and that it would have like good longevity, last a long time, out in the elements and everything. So I think it's just sort of like the little challenges and the learning as you go. There's not really a manual about how to do it, and every single mural is totally different too. Like, not totally different, but there's like lots of different challenges every single time. So I think it's just kind of that adapting to the situation that you're in that can be challenging at times.
Interesting.
Yeah. I've never fallen off anything. That's always a little bit of a concern if I'm doing something particularly high up. But I did go get certified to operate boom lifts and scissor lifts to try to eliminate the possibility of falling off.
Wow.
It was so fun. Like, didn't know whether or not I'd be scared of heights, because if you're not in those situations, you don't really know. But fortunately, it turned out I'm okay with them. So myself and my fiance went to get certified on operating these lifts, because I was like, I'm going to have to do this at some point, and I want to make sure I do it right, because this is a huge piece of equipment.
Yeah.
So fortunately, I haven't run into any issues with those. I've never gotten stuck up in the air or anything. But yeah.
These are all important considerations. So now I'm totally curious about getting certified as a boom operator, but I'm going to save that for another interview. You mentioned longevity. Can you share with us the average lifespan of a mural? I would have never thought about that. What does that look like?
So I think as long as you are using high quality materials and being aware of your environment, murals do last a good long while. I think, 5 to 10 years is probably like 5 years before, I guess, environmental factors set in, 3 to 5, and then like maybe 10 years, it might need some touch-ups, depending on where it is. Interior murals, those last forever, because they're not exposed to sunlight, they're not exposed to rain. They might be exposed to like kids, but usually, you can just wipe off crayon and marker pretty easily. When it comes to outside murals, those are definitely factors to take into consideration. And I always offer my clients the option of sealing it if they want to seal it. Sealing a mural kind of comes with ups and downs as well. Just in general, working with sealants can be a little tricky, but it can definitely help a mural stay vibrant for longer, especially if it's going to be cooked in the sun all day. That'll kind of zap the color out of it sometimes. So I definitely recommend that.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Talk to me a little bit about the feedback that you've gotten for your short-term rental owners that you've done murals. Have they shared with you how it has impacted their guest experience or their reviews or their average daily rates? What type of feedback have you gotten?
I definitely, the first one that I did down in Amelia Cove, she always tries to make a point of sending me like a little video or a little picture if somebody shares it on social media, like especially if people have like bloggers come through, that's kind of where you'll see that. And she'll always try to make a point of like sending me over the reel or the post or something when people make that point. I think that visibility is great and very important. I think probably the funniest one that I've gotten was the Grateful Happenings one. I guess they were hosting like a bridal party or something at one point. Or no, it was after a wedding. It was like a reception, and they had all the photo shoot was at the property, and people used the VW bus as the backdrop for a lot of their recording. It's so funny. But yeah, I think the feedback is just that people do resonate with it. People love it. And when I have repeat customers, that's really great for me to kind of know that like they're not only loving it in their space, but other people must be loving it too, because they're wanting to do more of it. And I also think if you have multiple spots, that cohesiveness is really great. For the mid-century modern, we ended up doing the same style in both of their different locations because that's kind of the style they were going for. And it must have gone down pretty well because they wanted to do a second one there. But yeah, people love it. Clients also really love to be involved in the process too, which is hands down my favorite part, is just working with people. I've loved the jobs I've had in the past. They've been really great creatively, but I kind of was missing working with people. And I think that they also take a lot of joy in it themselves. So all of that kind of contributes to.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I'm curious. I'm going to ask you a question, and you're going to be like, really, Stacey, you're really asking me this. But from a budget parameter perspective, wide ranges, I've never painted a mural, so I would have no idea what to even set aside from a budget perspective. Can you help give clarity, maybe a low end versus high end? And again, I know we're talking in very general terms. And if you're listening, do not go to Hannah and say, I heard you say that you were doing a mural for, right? Yeah. So just generally speaking, how much should I set aside budget wise if I have a mural that's in my brain that I'd like to get painted? For sure. I will say, so I price based off cost per square foot.
I think a lot of muralists do. It's probably the easiest way to do it, and that includes like the cost of materials and everything. So usually if I send somebody a quote over cost of materials, except for a lift, because I'm never really sure to the last minute what I'm going to need for something like that, that's all kind of included. So I would say, I've done murals that go from anywhere, that start around 1,200, that go kind of up from there, depending on the space and what people are looking for. But I will say that typically, I think most muralists, myself included, will charge somewhere between like $20 and maybe $50 a square foot, depending on what people are looking for.
Okay.
A very large, very rendered mural, it's going to take time and a lot of digital renditions first is going to be a lot more costly, but it also allows us a lot more like creative freedom and the chance to have fun versus something that might be a little bit smaller and a little bit cleaner. And I'm usually honest with people about what I think they need in a space. I'm never going to be like, you definitely need to cover this wall in completely rendered things if I think it's going to like overwhelm the space or if I think it's going to take away from what they've already done. So yeah, it really does range, and it never hurts to ask. I think some people hesitate because they're just like, well, I don't know if I can afford it, so I'm just not even going to ask. But I love working with people in general. So if someone's like, oh, I've got this budget I need to stick to, I'm like, great. I'm pretty varied in my styles. I'm pretty, experienced with working with a lot of different people on a lot of different budgets. So I always try to make it work.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Okay. Next question is, if someone is thinking about doing a mural for the first time in a property, what advice would you give to them? What perspective or words of wisdom would you share to help them kind of determine, okay, yeah, I think I do want a mural, or maybe I should wait? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah. I definitely think, I feel like I'm getting on like Pinterest and seeing, like, I'm a visual person, so sometimes I just need to see what other people have done. So I definitely think doing research to see what other people have done with their spaces, maybe even something a little bit more akin to the style that you're going for, or the look that you're going for. There's a lot of kind of visual references out there for people to see. So I definitely think doing some research there is a good place to start. Plus, you get excited about it when you see what cool things other people have done. And then, you can always ask as well, kind of like ask a muralist and be like, I had this wall. Do you think this is like a great potential, for a mural? Or do you think we could do something cool here? I have a lot of people that reach out to me and ask that question. And I'm always honest with them if I'm just like, I think a little something right here is going to really elevate this space. Murals, I think, can do kind of a lot of heavy lifting for a room as well. If it's a larger space that's maybe lacking a little something, or if you want something to really tie the room together, I think a mural can really do that. Kind of create that like wow factor. So yeah.
So good. So good. Okay, Hannah, I want to move to the lightning round. Okay. So I'm going to ask you a series of questions and just ask you to answer with the first thing that comes to mind. Okay.
Okay.
So first question is, where is your favorite place to vacation?
Ooh. I mean, I have to say the beach. Like, just in general, I love vacationing down on Gulf Shores. Like, it's local, it's right up the road, but 45 minutes and you're kind of in a completely different world. It's gorgeous down there. I love the coast and I love going in the sea. So I think definitely the beach.
I know. I'm a beach girl too. So I love the beach. All right. Next question. What's one place you've never been that you want to visit?
Somewhere cold. I know, completely different than what I just said, but I know. I love seeing the STRs and things that are in colder environments that you're supposed to like visit when it's cold. So you might actually see some snow or get to cuddle up and be cozy with some hot chocolate, because we don't do that very much in Lower Alabama. So I think it would be nice to experience a vacation in a cooler place.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah. I've heard so many people say Alaska, like
yeah.
I'm traveling there for the first time this year. So I've never been, but I am not a cold girl. Like I'm like, give me warm weather, the ocean, and a drink in my hand, and I'm good to go.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. All right. Yeah. Next question. What's one thing you know now that you wished you knew when you were starting out painting murals for short-term rental owners?
Definitely just ask questions. I think in general, like I said, mural painting is kind of like it's still a little niche, and it's still, the best way that you can get advice on how to do a project is just to ask somebody, and then to be very upfront with your client about the process and about everything, and to make them feel very involved. I think when I first started painting, I was like, they just want me to come in and do it and leave, But I think a lot of the time, especially with STRs, people put so much love into their spaces and so much care that getting them excited and getting them involved in the process is not a burden. It's like a lovely experience for them too. So
that's awesome. That's awesome. What's the best piece of advice you've ever been given?
I'm trying to think of how it was phrased. I think the summation of it is basically sort of, you don't have to have everything figured out before you take that step. I'm definitely one of those people that could be a classic overthinker, and I would always let that kind of hold me back. And I can't remember the phrase. It'll come back to me probably 3:00 this morning when I'm trying to I'll be sit up straight in bed. But essentially, I think it's just kind of take the risk, take the chance. It's definitely worth it, especially if you're pursuing a passion. You don't have to have everything figured out. If you have the confidence to do it, you already have more figured out than you think.
Yeah, that's great advice. And I think so often I always share with people, I'm a recovering perfectionist, right? So we'll see my side behind me that says progress over perfection, because when we try to have everything figured out, oftentimes it stalls our growth. Right. I'm not saying not to do due diligence. I'm not saying
for sure, for your
homework, right? But I think it's so important, even if, you aren't sure of every finite detail, keep putting one foot in front of the other, and you'll find yourself in new and amazing places.
Yeah.
And figuratively. Yeah, literally.
So true.
Yeah. Oh, okay, last question. What is one thing and or person that you're grateful for today?
I'm pretty eternally grateful for our fiance, Jesse. He is my logic guy. It's great being creative, love being creative and emotional and all over the place. It's bread and butter of who I am. But I definitely think that he's calm and logical and mathematic, which is helpful. And he often comes down to mural sites with me when I first get a call and I go down there, and he helps kind of keep me grounded and make sure I get the logistics of what I'm doing, the dimensions of the wall, the space, so that I have the freedom to be creative. And I still have that tether to real life. So pretty eternally grateful for his influence there.
Amazing. Oh, Jesse, we hope you listen to this, Jesse.
Oh,
He will, whether he likes it or not. He's listening. No, I'm kidding. Hannah, if someone is interested in learning more about you or how you might be able to bring a piece of creation to life in their properties, where is the best place for them to find you online?
Sure. So I have a website. It's just hannahleggartist.com, just all spelled out as my name is. And it's the same as my email address is just hannahleggartist@gmail.com. And I am pretty consistently on my phone. I think it's attached to me at the hip. So I'm pretty always checking my email. So I think that's probably the best way to reach me.
Awesome. And Legg spelled with 2 G's. So HANNAHLEGG.
Yes.
Awesome.
Yep.
Hannah, it's been so great to talk to you. Thank you so much for being with us.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me. It's been lovely to chat about all this. And I think, all of us kind of sharing our stories and our journeys really makes you realize that you're all in the same boat. We're all figuring it out. And we're all making really cool stuff out there. So,
amen.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Now, before you go, I want to give a quick shout out to some of the amazing women inside the Female Short-Term Rental Investors Facebook group. Just 21 hours ago, as of the time of this recording, Jessica Richards-Sagan. Jessica, if I have butchered your last name. I'm so sorry. But Jessica posted questions about towels and sheets. I've seen a lot of Airbnb that have white towels. The problem is they get really dingy really quickly and have to be replaced, in my opinion. I personally like the idea of colored towels, but I recently heard a host say that colored towels and sheets give an unclean appearance. What do you think? This is such a fun poll to see changing in real time. But as of today, we have 241 votes and 58 comments. And so far in the votes, Team White Towels is winning with 69% of the votes. Team Colored Towels is in second place with 31%. So fun. If you voted in that poll, thank you for doing so. And Jessica, thanks for asking the question. And that wraps up today's episode. I hope you have a phenomenal week ahead. And my friend, I will see you very soon.